Show your face. I'm gonna show mine all day long. So I'm not scared of my message.
Ma'am, would you answer a question for a documentary my friends and I are making?
Sure.
I'm curious about what you think of this gentleman. And
I think he's scared that all these young people and all these activists are going to take away his guns, and that's not what we're here for. We're just here for regulations and safety, gun safety.
Sure.
So I think he's scared, and that's why he's hiding his face.
Why do you think there's such disconnect and such polarization when it comes to gun control? What do you think at the end of the day, the disconnect is between whatever it is that brings this gentleman out today and everybody else?
That's a really good question. I think it's what your priorities are and what you care about. And I think everybody who's out here today care about children and care about safety. And there's a portion of our country and our government that care more about rifles and guns and the money that comes with that.
What my father there is doing, he's holding up the sign in front of the no gun control sign, which is the obstruction of free speech. And I disagree with that, which is why I don't want to stand with them.
What do you think of this gentleman behind you?
Who's behind me? Is there somebody behind me?
There is, sir.
Oh, I study wars and violence and how that happens, and I just don't think that widespread civilian gun ownership has a place in a peaceful democratic society. I mean, look how many other aspects of life are regulated by the government, right? Are people crying for freedom because of regulation in those areas? Do you realize how much regulation we have in our lives? How many rules the government sets? But for this one thing, for guns and access to guns, we just don't have rules? Why?
I think that this march has done a good job of trying to bring people together that are responsible gun owners and people like me who don't own guns and kind of disagree with all guns. But, you know, I think the right answer right now is to push for smart legislation that allows responsible gun owners to own guns. So universal background checks, red flag laws, and that sort of thing. I think that's the right next step. And then maybe down the line, when we can reevaluate how gun violence is under those laws, we might want to push for more extreme gun restrictions.
Senate negotiators have reached a bipartisan deal on guns that includes the backing of 10 Senate Republicans.
Tomorrow will mark 3 weeks since a devastating school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Over those last 3 weeks, Senators Murphy from Connecticut, Senator Sinema from Arizona, Senator Tillis from North Carolina, and others have been working to identify steps that Congress should take to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future.
The Senate compromise that has been proposed this week, it's a very modest proposal that tweaks a few things at the margins, but isn't any sort of comprehensive gun package. Professionally, I study gun laws, and so I've been looking at what gun laws can do for these tragedies, and my conclusion is, unfortunately, not very much.
Congress is working on a bipartisan proposal for some very, very modest gun regulations. It's, I guess, better than nothing. To my mind, doesn't go nearly far enough. These mass shootings, particularly the recent ones by 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, I mean, these are things that are enabled because they're able to just so easily go into a gun store, go online, and get these types of weapons that have no legitimate purpose other than for killing people and maiming people.
So I'm the assistant manager of DC Security Associates. We're located on K Street, so really just a few blocks away from the White House. In Virginia, there's very little rules on what you are not allowed to have. So pretty much anything in the store is up for grabs for anyone who is a Virginia resident, 18 to 21. 18-year-olds are allowed to buy shotguns and rifles. Now, they're not allowed to purchase handguns until they are 21.
You can decide to buy a gun one day in Virginia, get it the same day.
Exactly. In D.C., you buy the firearm, and you more than likely may not see it for possibly 2 months, maybe 3 months.
I live in Maryland.
Okay.
Does that mean, so I'll be 18 in August, could I in Virginia buy a firearm in a day, or no because of where I live?
So technically, yes, you can come to Virginia and purchase a firearm as long as it's a shotgun or rifle. So let's say when you turn 18, you decide to buy a shotgun. So you decide to go hunting, you can come here to the store. As long as that firearm is also legal for you to own in the state of Maryland, then we can sell you that firearm, complete your background check here, you take possession of it. Not every firearm necessarily has to be for self-defense. Some of the firearms here, they're just for, practicing long-distance shooting or just going to the range and mess with. I have quite a few myself that are really just to go to the range and mess around with.
Have you ever had experiences where you felt nervous about someone that you're selling a firearm to?
Yes. We've had those kind of situations before where we don't feel comfortable transferring a firearm to a particular individual. So in those situations, if we have that gut feeling where we don't feel comfortable with that sale or with that transfer, we do not proceed with it. So we do have the right to refuse business to that particular person. It happens on not on a regular basis, but every now and then. Just because if an incident does occur, that does fall back on us to where if someone goes out and commits a crime with that firearm, we are responsible. So we also have to go to court to justify our actions with releasing that firearm. If someone wants to do damage, they're going to do damage one way or another. Even if firearms are banned, like places like the UK, where firearms are not legal, crimes are still being committed on a regular, and some even more gruesome than what you may see here.
All right, thank you very much for talking to us, man. Thank you.
Britain had a very strict gun licensing regime into the 1990s, and it still had mass shooters, which caused it to ban handguns entirely. Australia, same thing, strict licensing regime, the kind of regime that Democrats in this country dream of enacting. It did not solve the problem, and so those countries have been forced to resort to widespread disarmament of their civilian population. American culture has always been more violent. So even in the 19th century, when American gun control laws were stricter than the British, American rates of violence, particularly in the South, were higher than they were in Britain. So I do think there are cultural forces that make the U.S. more prone to violence. Some of that may be that we have an anti-authoritarian streak, so we're not as respectful to authority as other cultures.
I mean, the other countries don't have a Second Amendment, and so they don't have the same debate over what it protects and what it doesn't. And so that means they don't have the same argument that can be made to challenge gun regulations. And in my mind, they're just much more reasonable about public safety. I mean, the statistics for the U.S. are just off the charts. And when it's off the charts, like literally it's hard to draw a chart that has other countries on it. And the U.S., we see our Second Amendment absolutists, our unlawful private militia members aligning themselves in other culture war issues like anti-critical race theory, anti-immigrant in general, anti-LGBTQ, anti-Muslim, and it's also, they've become allied with conspiracy theories, including about COVID and about the election, the 2020 election. And so everything here has become so much more dangerous because we have guns in the mix, and Americans, feel strongly about their freedoms, they feel strongly about their Constitution, and I think by having that provision, the Second Amendment, it gives those who just want to push this for their own political purposes, for their own grievances that they have, that they feel aren't being addressed. This gives them something to unite around. And we've seen that, again, in so many different extremist movements uniting together, and guns is a central feature of that.
I'm Annette Elliott. I am the owner and president of Showmasters Incorporated, and we run 52 gun shows a year in 4 states and 2 sportsman shows.
What brings you guys here today?
We like guns.
One in the hand, one in the bag, bubbling. Look at the cash coming in. Come get your man, little nigga bugging me. Just need a bag, quit all that jaw jackery.
What brings you here?
I grew up with my dad going to gun shows, looking at knives. Just so to continue, just here, look at knives, wander around.
This is your son?
Yes, it's my son.
How are you, man? Are you guys planning on buying anything today?
Yeah, I bought one thing. Bought a flashlight.
What brings you here?
I work here.
Why gun show since you're not selling guns?
I think it fits because most of the videos are related to war from ancient times up to the present.
Interesting.
And so hunters and others that use arms are always interested in wartime experiences.
Why the Confederate flag shirts and pins?
Well, because we're in the South and there would be customers interested in that. We're not making political statements by any means.
Understood. It's a business decision.
Yes, it really is.
All right. What brings you here today?
I'm selling the books that I write. This one is a parody of Obama done as the Cat in the Hat. This one, you want me to hold it up?
Sure, yeah.
This one's about Al Gore and environmentalism. It's about how environmentalists are destroying our country for profit, starring Al Gore as the greedy environmentalist. This is a good one you should bring to school and show your teachers. This one is about the media and Trump, to think that I saw it on CNN Live. And this, my latest, is about critical race theory and the whole identity politics hustle. It's about a ship full of social justice warriors that's out hunting for the great white racist. But they end up catching each other because they keep finding these flaws in each other's wokeness. It's a very ironic story about how the anti-racists are like the most racist people ever. Let's see what we got here. So the Muslim guy has to walk the plank because he refuses to go out on a date with the transgender lady. So he's like offending his womanhood. So they make him walk the plank. And then the woman, it turns out, she once dialed 911, and you can't do that. That's racist. So they make her walk the plank. So we found that the tranny liked Shakespeare, a notorious straight white male, and the lesbian kept a picture of Lincoln, which was completely beyond the pale. A racist tweet from last decade forced the Indian to make the jump, and we all found out to our horror that the Mexican had voted for Trump. So they have a big-ass sword fight. And the captain says, Black Lives Matter, and the black guy says, all lives matter, you moron. And the captain says, you're just a simple-minded darky, you don't get it. I should add that the captain throws racial epithets at everyone as he executes them. He's one of my favorite characters. He's just, oh yeah, and then the ship, the whole ship gets swallowed by the whale, which turns out to be China. Yeah, the only survivor is the black guy.
What does he do with the rest of his life? Just goes on living?
No. He ends up in a concentration camp.
I don't think we're going to lose this right. I think that, especially if Americans are paying attention. We just had Joe Biden come out and say that the number one reason that children die in the United States is gun violence. That's very disingenuous. It's not true. The number one reason kids die in the United States is car accidents. It's not normal for children to die from gun violence. It's the gangs. So that's just, and I think if we were honest about the conversation, that we would be working on education, on helping these people that end up in gangs, and working on it from that angle, and not acting like, when a school shooting happens, that it's 169 since 1999 died. That's a very different number than whatever the 20,000 or 5,000 that die in car accidents, or I think the accidental shootings are somewhere between 300 and 500. They're very low numbers in comparison to what they're trying to claim all these accidental deaths and injuries are. And
So why do I think the United States is divided on gun issues? Well, first of all, let me just say that I am a Marine Corps veteran, so I'm coming at it from a military background perspective. So what would I say to you as a young man to convince you? We're divided because we're divided on the Constitution. We don't really understand what our founders meant. We don't understand the Declaration of Independence. We don't understand our Bill of Rights and the amendments contained within. Sadly, because history, true American history, is not being taught. And actually, that's where the division starts, because we aren't for our Constitution. We have half the population that believes in the Constitution, that believes it was a solid document. What makes America so special? Really, what sets us apart? We're unique. You go to many other nations, boys, and you're going to find out that people don't dream. They don't think about their future, like the opportunities they're going to have. And again, this is on and off from Second Amendment, but bottom line is, historically speaking, America, we are the greatest. And that doesn't make us bad, that we're the greatest nation on earth. That you can come to America and dream. Why we have those amendments, it's to protect you as an American citizen. You should be able to have free speech, to say what you want. Whether I agree with you or not, Andrew, you should be able to say what you think. It's just like me as a Christian, as a woman, almost 62 years old, I should be able to freely speak. And just let's have discourse. Let's talk about what we agree on, and let's talk about what we disagree on. But bottom line is, I love America, and it really saddens me that we are as divided as we are. It's very, it breaks my heart, because I love America. I love what we stand for freedom, for every individual. And to own a gun was protection. It was protection from a tyrannical government that went crazy with control and wanting to tell you exactly what to do. See, that's what set America apart, was that we have freedoms.
Why do you think America is so divided on gun control?
I don't know. I think just people have different perspectives, and people are scared of guns. They haven't been exposed throughout their lifetime. Like, for example, my son right here, he's been shooting since he's 4 years old. Before he picked up a gun, he knew all the parts of a gun. He knew how to disassemble it, how to put it back together, and all the safety aspects of a gun.
A lot of people are afraid of guns, given from what social media and just the news, our mindset on weapons. It's totally negative. I look at firearms just like sex or drugs. We're taught not to teach it, but what is being scared is to not knowing a firearm or not knowing. But when you teach it and you understand it, it's totally different. The context is totally different. The news presents it's so bad, but it's not bad if you know the proper knowledge of it. If I didn't have the knowledge or honestly the experience, they would scare me too. If you somebody walking in that's new to guns, this is completely freaky. I'm freaking out. Once I've shot it over time, once I've had that proper education, I pick up a gun and, I do everything, break it down with my eyes closed. Like, just familiar with the weapon.
Do you have kids?
Absolutely. Yep. Newborn.
When are you, boy or girl?
Boy.
When are you going to start him shooting?
Probably 5 or 7. Between that 5 and 7 threshold. Start with BB guns and we'll move on up. I was taught at a young age safety of it. I wasn't even allowed to play Call of Duty, Nerf guns, or anything like that. My dad was like, all right, before you play this game, how do you put this gun on the table, make it safe, clear the weapon. You're not going to play anything until you clear this weapon. So he installed that in me. I honestly didn't forget, so I plan to do the same thing with my children.
In Virginia, they've changed the private sale laws in the state, so there are requirements even on the private sale side now in Virginia to do a background check. So there's really not a loophole, so to speak, anymore.
For someone who goes in there and wants to buy a gun, how long does it actually take, the background check, to purchase a gun like that?
So there's something called the National Instant Criminal Check System, and it depends. So basically, you call this number, you give your FFL ID, they say, okay, this person has no outstanding warrants, is not a convicted felon, and there's a couple other things that pop up, like if you're on a no-fly list, what it'll do is it'll flag you, and they're not going to say no, it'll be a delay. And the FBI will usually, if you're a serious threat, the FBI is supposed to respond to it. Unfortunately, the FBI is outright incompetent, and people who should have been flagged under the current system are not being flagged. Straight up, but the most recent mass shooting, he was on a list, on a hold list, not a no list, but a hold list, and he bought 2 firearms and then went and did terrible things. These are pull the trigger once, they fire once. There are some machine guns in there. They're basically collector's items. It's sort of like, imagine if people were petitioning to get rid of Ford Model Ts. They're out there, and they're super fucking unsafe. They're extremely hard to get, and they're extremely expensive. Do you know how much the cheapest machine gun I saw in there was? $16,000. Do you know how long it takes to get through the legal process to buy one? Literally years. You have to get a special permit. You have to talk to your local sheriff. Some states, it's straight out illegal. You have to pay a $200 tax stamp to the ATF. You have to send your fingerprints in, everything. Seriously, it's really hard to buy a machine gun. If you want to talk about regulating semi-automatic firearms, that's absolutely different than talking about machine guns. Nobody has used a machine gun, a legally owned machine gun, in the commission of a crime in 30 years. It just doesn't happen, dude. It's like using a Ford Model T to rob a bank. You wouldn't do it.
What's your reason for owning guns? Why do you own your guns?
I own guns because I believe it's a fundamental human right to self-defense, and frankly, I'm not as good at fist fighting as I'd like to be, and I don't want to live in a world where if someone can beat me up, they can take away my rights. Hurricane Florence took out my house, and I was homeless in my car while I was active duty. I was sleeping in my car with all my worldly possessions in the trunk, sleeping at the truck stop. I wake up to someone trying to open my driver's side door from the inside. I went and grabbed my handgun, and he reached out to grab it, and I shined the flashlight. I was like, get the... started screaming at him, and then he fucked off. But he was trying to open the door to get to me, or to my stuff, more accurately. He probably didn't see me until I started moving around. I was just scared shitless because I'd just woken up. But I attend a lot of classes, so I'm not going to shoot someone recklessly.
When you go out in public with a weapon like that, you're sending one message, which is that I can kill you if I want to kill you, and there's really little you can do about it, unless, of course, you also happen to have a semi-automatic assault-style rifle, and then we'll see who can pull the trigger first. So this escalation, I think, of the gun culture and the, the matching up of gun rights with these other cultural war issues, the acceptability in some people's minds of using violence as a means to an end. Recent polling shows kind of alarming numbers of Americans thinking that in certain situations, political violence is acceptable. All of that is a dangerous path for the U.S. right now.
Talk to us? We're asking people what they think about guns. You want us to come sit down for a moment? So scoot in so there's room. All right.
I'm not sure if having stricter laws will actually make a difference, because part of the problems that we have with guns are the fact that people are able to go to like shows and things like that.
Like, first of all, I want to point out that the Second Amendment came out when people had to load their fucking like muskets up for like a minute. You know, you weren't in battle like shooting down your boy in Call of Duty with your ARs. You were kind of, you had your little weird old stick that you would put the gunpowder in, and that was what originally I think the Second Amendment proposed. We won the War of Independence, right, because we were storing up guns, right? We had stored up weapons and arms, and I believe that should be necessary. But then again, I think that it can get so excessive. I don't think you should be able to bring your AR-15 into a Walgreens to go buy gum, you know, for your sister.
I have mixed feelings about guns. I mean, I've shot guns, you know, with my stepdads when I was a kid, and I'm great at target practice, but I don't own a gun, and I don't think I ever will, just because it's just too dangerous. Like, someone else could get it, break into my house or whatever, and I would feel really bad if, like, a kid or whatever was shot using a gun that I bought. On the way up here, me and my buddy were just, you know, trying to kill time in the truck, and I was looking up gun laws, and then I was like, well, I want to carry my sword around. Let me see where it's, you know, where I can carry my sword. It's illegal to carry anything more than 5 inches of a blade, but you can walk around with an AK-47. How come I can't walk around carrying a sword on my side?
Was that hyperbolic, or are you a sword owner?
I do have a sword. I think swords are cool, but I can't carry it anywhere, so I mean, what's the point?
I'm a single mom, so with everything that's going on in the world, I feel like guns it's a necessary thing. I feel like everybody should have a gun. I just recently got my concealed carry license, so I'm really happy about that. I want an assault weapon. Do I feel like everybody should have one? Mm-hmm. No. When you get old enough, buy a gun.
Thank you for the advice.
I've seen the damage that they can do. I grew up with a father that was a hunter. But when I was in high school, my brother was actually a victim of a school shooting, and he was shot with a 9mm, and he lost several organs and almost lost his life. So, you know, seeing that amount of damage that it had, I don't really see where there's a reason to have something like that.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
You have a good day.
I seen some cold nights and bloody days. They grab me and bullet spray. They use me wrong, so I sing this song to this day. My body is cold steel for real. I was made to kill. That's why they keep me concealed under car seats. They sneak me in clubs. Been in the hands of mad thugs. They feed me when they load me with mad slugs. 17 precisely, one in my head. They call me Desert Eagle. Semi-auto with lead. I'm 7 inches, 4 pounds. Been through so many.